Hey everybody, ready for a deep dive into something we all struggle with? We're talking about breaking bad habits. Those things we just can't seem to shake.
It's funny. We often think about willpower like it's some kind of muscle. But really, breaking bad habits is about understanding how those habits work in the first place.
Okay, so it's like figuring out the why behind the what.
Exactly. It's like, say you're trying to cut back on sugar.
Oh, tell me about it, my weakness.
So instead of just saying no more sugar, you have to ask, why am I craving sugar? Is it stress? Boredom? Are you actually, genuinely hungry?
That's so true. Sometimes I just need to eat real food and then the craving goes away.
Right. And then
Yeah.
you can start tackling those triggers instead. One of the sources you sent over actually called them the cues for our habits, which I thought
Yeah.
was interesting.
Cues, that makes sense. It's like our brain gets a signal and then bam, the habit kicks in.
Exactly. And once you notice that cue, you can start to change the routine. That
Hmm.
same source talked about how all habits, good or bad, follow a similar pattern. Cue, routine, reward.
Interesting. So to break the habit, you need to disrupt that pattern somehow.
Basically. And a big part of that is becoming more aware of those cues. Like, are you more likely to snack when you're stressed? Or maybe you always scroll through social media when you're bored.
Oh, that's totally me with social media. It's like my default when I'm waiting for anything.
See, and that's where that idea of habit tracking comes in. Have you ever tried that?
I haven't, but I've heard of it. What exactly is it? Just like writing down every time I open Instagram.
That's the basic idea, but the key is to also jot down what was happening right before you opened the app. Were you feeling anxious? Avoiding something else?
So you can start to see the patterns.
Exactly. And then once you know your triggers, you can start to manage them. Maybe you need to find healthier ways to cope with stress, like going for a walk or listening to music, or maybe you just need to put your phone in another room.
It's funny how those little changes can make a big difference.
They really can. Another tip from the sources you sent was all about replacing bad habits with good ones.
Okay, so instead of scrolling on my phone while I wait, I should like do a crossword puzzle.
Well, maybe. The idea is to find something that's both enjoyable and productive, and it should be something you can actually do in that moment, right?
That's a good point. A crossword puzzle probably wouldn't work while I'm waiting for the bus.
Right. It's about finding what works for you. And don't be afraid to experiment a bit.
Yeah, it's all about finding what sticks, right? And speaking of sticking with it, one thing I struggle with is staying motivated. Like, I'll
Same.
start strong and then completely fall off the wagon a few days later.
I hear you. That's why starting small is so important. One of your sources called it the minimum viable effort, which I thought was a great way to put it.
Minimum viable effort.
Yeah, like what's the smallest step you can take towards your goal? So instead of trying to meditate for an hour every day, maybe you start with just 5 minutes.
I like that. It feels way less intimidating that way.
Exactly. It's much easier to build a habit when it feels manageable. And then as you start to see progress, you'll naturally feel more motivated to keep going.
Motivation is key. It's like that saying, motivation is what gets you started. Habit is what keeps you going. But even with the best intentions, sometimes life happens and we stumble. What about those times when we slip up? How do we bounce back from setbacks?
Well, first of all, it's important to remember that setbacks are a normal part of the process. Everyone slips up sometimes. It's what you do after the slip up that matters.
That's reassuring to hear. I always beat myself up when I make a mistake.
Don't be so hard on yourself. One of the articles you sent actually talked about the importance of self-compassion. Like, how would you treat a friend who is going through the same thing? You wouldn't berate them for messing up, right?
That's true. I'd probably tell them to cut themselves some slack.
Exactly. And that's what you need to do for yourself, too. Be kind to yourself, learn from the experience, and get back on track when you're ready.
So it's all about progress, not
Yeah.
perfection. That's good to keep in mind.
Absolutely. And another thing that can be super helpful is finding an accountability partner, someone you can check in with regularly and share your progress with.
Oh, I love that idea. Like having a cheerleader in your corner rooting you on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's much easier to stay motivated when you've got someone to share the journey with. And it doesn't have to be anything formal. Even just texting a friend every day to say, hey, I did my 5 minutes of meditation can make a big difference.
It's amazing how powerful a little support can be.
It really is. And remember, breaking bad habits is a journey, not a race. It takes time, effort, and a whole lot of self-compassion.
And sometimes a good accountability buddy.
Mm.
But seriously, all of this makes me wonder, is there a connection between the habits we form and our personality types? Like, are some people just naturally more prone to certain habits than others?